There's been extensive damage in Tehran and other parts of Iran as US and Israeli attacks continue. Several railway lines, bridges and power lines have been hit across the country. One strike in a residential area in Al-Borz province west of Tehran killed at least 18 people. President Donald Trump has set a deadline for early Wednesday morning Iran time for Tehran to reopen the Strait of Hormuz. He's warned that the country will be left without any power plants or bridges if they fail to make a deal. The Israeli military has warned the public to stay away from Iran's trains and railways. And there are reports of a US-Israeli attack on Iran's Kharg Island. US media suggest military locations were targeted. Well, the island is Iran's main hub for the country's oil exports. Now, this is the second time Kharg Island has come under attack. We're going to bring in Tohid Asadi now. He is in Tehran. Obviously, this is a significant development, if true. Tohid, the US and Israel striking Kharg Island once again. Do we have any confirmation of that from the Iranian side?
So far, we've got Mehr news agency reporting about some explosions from the Kharg Island. Obviously, this is not the first time that we received reports about such attacks. We know that previously the island was targeted, but still the reports were on the basis of the attacks on the military sites, not the oil infrastructure. And to give you a picture of the significance of that island, we know that when it comes to oil exports of Iran, that is critically important, and a huge proportion of oil export of the country goes through the trajectory of Kharg Island. Obviously, if that happens, that's going to be a very major development, as the Iranian side has already promised for a retaliatory strike in case of attack on its oil infrastructure, and this is one of the most important ones to be targeted. But still, speaking of the ongoing airstrikes by the Americans and Israelis, and in particular about the recent warning that came from the Israeli side, we've got reports about attacks happening targeting the railway station as well as railways across the country. We had it from the local authorities in the city of Mashhad and also in Khuzestan. They have decided to suspend the scheduled trains. Also, we've got this report from railways being targeted between Tehran and Karaj, between Tabriz and Mianeh, also in Khorramshahr, in Zanjan, in Qom and Kashan, also in the city, in the railway between Qom and Kashan. It's reported that at least 2 people have been killed. So this is coming after a direct warning by the Israelis that asked the Iranian citizens to get away, to not stay close to railway stations, and part and parcel of the attacks, increasing attacks, I would say, on Iranian infrastructure. We know that, speaking of the infrastructure, this is not the only place, the only location, but we know that universities are also witnessing the continued campaign of airstrikes. The Ministry of Science, Research and Technology says over 30 universities across the country have been impacted. Over 700 schools have been targeted either directly or indirectly. And a couple of hours ago, earlier in the morning, I was in the campus of Sharif University of Technology, one of the most important technical universities, or perhaps the most important, I would say, known as Iran's MIT, which was targeted yesterday. The amount of damage and destruction to several buildings on the campus was massive. The other day, I was also in Shahid Beheshti's campus. Again, there we witnessed massive, huge amount of destruction as a result of these airstrikes. Again, speaking of the infrastructure, we know that there is a longer list. The Red Crescent says more than 100,000 civilian units have been targeted, some of them fully reduced to rubble, some of them partially impacted. But this is a very, I would say, escalated situation, seeing the scope of these targeted areas getting broadened and getting extended over the past 2 weeks. We know that even the steel companies, which are critically important in terms of industry, have been also impacted, along with other industrial segments, pharmaceutical units, and other industry-related infrastructure.
Well, given that, Tohid, the US and Israel expanding their targets, is there any sign that Iran is looking to make a deal now with the US ahead of the deadline that is in less than 12 hours?
The gist of the matter from the Iranian side, based on different statements that we hear from Iranian side, is that they're saying they're not going to get engaged in any direct negotiation with the United States. Also, we know that there are mediated communication between the two sides. We know that Americans have come up with a proposal, Iranians have come up with another proposal. And if you look at the public rhetoric from both sides, it seems that Washington and Tehran at this point are poles apart, actually paving the way for less and less chance for any diplomatic settlement in this already intricate situation. And Iran also says any sort of diplomatic settlement would be conditioned upon a ceasefire or halting of the aggressions, now getting into a broader scope and obviously seeing the very reality on the ground, which is indicative of the continuation of the airstrikes by the Americans and Israelis. The chance for diplomatic engagement becomes less and less. And of course, added to that is this contextual element, the historical background that we have to keep in mind. You know, it's not easy for Iranians to talk with the U.S. administration under President Trump because they were already trying it not once but twice over the past 10 months, as I would say. And in both cases, while they were expecting next round of talks, they faced a campaign of all of a sudden strikes targeting the country. The gist of the matter here is that diplomatic engagement could be possible. Iran is also engaged in, let's say, regional and international interactions diplomatically. Part of that could be interpreted as an attempt to de-escalate the situation, but there is this trust issue, and it goes without saying, it's crystal clear that it's not going to be easy for Iranians to trust the Americans, and that is the vantage point that we hear and we see when it comes to the rhetoric that we hear from the Iranian side.
Thanks so much, Tohid. That's Tohid Asadi for us there in Tehran. I just want to bring your attention to some of the pictures that we've just received into our newsroom. These are rescue workers, search and rescue workers in Kharg, Iran. We understand there have been multiple attacks on railway lines, which is exactly what Israel and the United States had threatened earlier in the day. It certainly appears like they are following through now on those threats. As I mentioned, these rescue workers taking away the injured from an attack on railway lines in Kharg in Iran.